So I'm Drew Lyon. I'm the extension weed scientist at Washington State University in Pullman. You know, I think growers are understanding it. It's a problem of understanding and translating it. It's hard to convince somebody that when something's really working well for them, they should stop doing it and do something that maybe might cost a little more or might not be quite as effective because it might delay resistance, but there's no guarantee it's going to delay resistance. So I think they understand it at one level. They understand the situation they're in, but whether it translates into changing practice, I don't know, because we're asking them to preemptively change, and the history is people tend to change when forced to change, and it's a hard sell. We'll see. You know, it's ever since we've had synthetic organic herbicides, we've had resistance. So you can't use a synthetic organic herbicide without starting to put selection pressure on a population. Most populations have some low quantity of mutants out there that are resistant to a product, and if you use that product over and over again, you basically enrich that population with those individuals that have that mutation. So what might be one plant in a million before you ever spray it, after 4 or 5 years might become 50% of the population. So we've relied very heavily on herbicides in recent decades. We have to go back to relying on some other things like crop rotation, maybe some tillage, strategic tillage. We probably tilled too much in the past. We don't want to go back to that, but maybe using tillage wisely. Combination of no-till and till. Actually, people who till all the time also select for weeds that aren't herbicide resistant, but they're adapted to their tillage system. So the bottom line is anything you do over and over again, whether that's herbicides, tillage, same kind of tillage, same crop, you develop weeds that are proliferate in those systems. So change it up, change up your herbicides. And in the past, we had a lot of companies developing a lot of new chemistry. Those days are over. We only have a few companies that have discovery programs today. New chemistry isn't on the horizon. And so if we burn out a herbicide, unlike 20 years ago when we just go get a new one to replace it, there's nothing new coming along. So we really need to steward the products we have today to make sure they last as long as possible. Yeah, it's actually a concern throughout the agricultural systems of the country. It's getting a lot of press right now because of the resistance issues to glyphosate in a lot of the corn and soybean belt, but it's also an issue here in small grain country. We have a lot of weeds developing resistance to the group 2, group 1 chemistry, so the ACCase inhibitors, the ALS inhibitors, and we are in an era where there aren't a lot of new things coming along, and so my pitch was that we need to start taking better care of the herbicides that work today. Don't ride them until they no longer work, but steward them a little better, use more integrated weed management techniques in order to extend the length of time that they're viable crop production chemicals. Well, as an extension weed scientist, I give a lot of talks on the topic. We've developed some decision support tools that help growers understand what active ingredients and what mechanisms of action are in different herbicide products and wheat and pulse crops. A lot of times you can buy a herbicide, it's got a different name, but if you look at what's in it, it's the same chemistry as in another herbicide, or if it's not the exact same active ingredient, it's got the same mechanism of action. So these tools help them, what are the mechanisms of action that are in these various herbicides, and what other herbicides have that same mechanism of action that I shouldn't use following this current one. So trying to educate people on what mechanisms of action are, how herbicide resistance starts, and then what are some of the effective tools to look at that. We also have people, not myself, looking at different crops that we can bring into our rotation. So we're in the Pacific Northwest, we're very wheat focused. Wheat does very well here in the Pacific Northwest, makes a lot of profit, but we're using the same chemistry over and over again in the wheat. So if we can bring some different crops in, we can change that chemistry up and hopefully delay the onset of herbicide resistance in our wheat crops.